Hello, everyone. My name is Zach, and this is Science Explosion at Hudson Public Library. Thank you so much for joining me today. All right, so we're going to be doing another cooking one, and this time we are going to be turning grapes into raisins. All right, so there are a few ways that you can turn grapes into raisins. I assume that most people watching this knows that that's where raisins come from. You can either make them in the sun, or today I'm going to be showing you how to make them in a toaster oven. And we're going to be talking a little bit about why people make grapes into raisins in the first place and what happens when you do. But for now, I think we'll just get started on the cooking. So if you want to follow along, you can feel free to do this out in the sun, but it's pretty cloudy right now, and I don't really want to leave grapes outside of the library for that long because I feel like they would probably just get eaten up. So we're going to be doing it in this toaster oven here. So if you want to follow along, you're going to need either an oven or a toaster oven. The recipe I'm using just calls for an oven, but like I've said before, we don't have an oven at the library, but we do have a toaster oven, and I think it'll work just fine. You'll need just a tiny amount of oil here. I've just got some vegetable oil. If you've got a non-stick pan that is oven or toaster oven safe, then you can use that too. You might want to check though, because a lot of things that are non-stick are not going to be oven safe. And of course, you're going to need grapes. Now, you might be asking yourself, what kind of grapes can I use? And the answer to that is any kind of grapes you want. So even though you normally see raisins that are a certain color, you can pick whatever kind of grapes you want. So these are just red seedless grapes right here. But you can feel free to use white grapes if you like to. You'll end up getting golden raisins, which aren't as common but are just as good, or any other kind that you like. The only thing that I would recommend is you should probably use seedless. If you don't use seedless, if you get grapes with seeds in them, that's fine, but I would recommend taking the seeds out first. Otherwise, it's not going to turn out nearly as well. All right, so this is what we're starting with here, a grape. I would taste one of these grapes before you cook. What do you notice when you eat that? Think about how it tastes. Think about the texture. What kind of flavors do you notice? So I want you to remember those so that we can compare them to the raisins when we are done with this. So, all right, if you're doing this in the oven, you're going to want to preheat your oven. I will do the same thing here with my toaster oven, which will not take nearly as long to heat up. So while I'm talking to you, that should be plenty of time. But if you're doing this in the oven, make sure you get it preheated. The temperature you're going to want to go at is around 225 degrees. Now that's a lot colder than what you normally run an oven at. And the reason for that is we're not really trying to cook these. What's happening with turning grapes into raisins isn't so much cooking as it is drying. So I want you to think about that, because that will be part of what I'm going to ask you about later of why are we doing this in the first place. So, yep, this is heating up. So we're going to start with putting just a teeny little bit of oil on our thing. It won't need much, just to try to make them not stick quite so much. And then I've got a brush here, and I will make sure that it's all brushed with oil. By the way, I didn't mention it before, but whenever you are cooking, it is always important to wash your hands. So I did this right before I made the video. There we go, lightly oiled. I'll set that aside to one. And then we layer the grapes onto here. So I've just got a bunch of grapes here. And you're just going to pick them off and lay them on here. Make sure to get any stems that stick to them off. If you wanted to see what happens, you could leave some of them on the bunch and see if you can get raisins on the vine. In fact, I think I'm going to try that just because I've never seen anybody do that before. And we'll see how it goes. Just make sure that you have them so that they are spread out. You don't want them overlapping. Remember that grapes have somewhat of a delicate skin, so you don't want to crush them too much when you're doing this. So by the way, this is the agricultural variety of grape. There's quite a few different varieties, but did you know that there are wild grapes? And did you know that they grow in Hudson? That is right. There are wild grapes growing in Hudson. They're not going to look nearly this big, but if you know what grape leaves look like, you can find them fairly easily. Just look up a picture of grape leaves, and wild grape leaves look about like that. And then they do grow on a vine in bunches like this, but they are much, much smaller. How big? Maybe around that big? Maybe maybe a little bigger, something like that. And if you're curious whether you can eat them or not, the answer is yes. They aren't going to taste like your regular grapes, but you can definitely eat them. And in fact, I do. Most of what people do with them, though, is make them into jams. So I don't know if anybody around here likes to make wild grape jam, but I know that you definitely can. You can make other sauces and that kind of things. Ooh, this looks like a bad grape to me. I'm not going to do that one. Yeah, so definitely sort out any bad grapes. Throw them on your compost pile. All right, so you want to make sure that this is just one layer. If they are stacked at all, then you will need to get a larger baking dish, but that should be good. You can see right there, I've got a good layer, and I do have some on the vine just because I want to know what will happen. Okay, so 225 degrees, and that is in Fahrenheit, just in case anybody's using Celsius here, that will be 110 degrees. So the important thing is you want that to not be too warm. We're not so much cooking these as we are drying them. Then you're going to stick them in. And you're going to leave them in there until they get still a little bit plump, but mostly dry. So they're going to probably be a little more plump than your normal raisins are going to be, but about what a raisin is, that's what you're going to be looking for. So how long is this going to take? Well, you're going to want to check on it every once in a while, but this should take a few hours. So I'm guessing for us, for this medium-sized grapes, it'll probably take around 4 hours. If you're using larger grapes, it'll take a little more. And if you're using smaller grapes, then it'll take less time. If for some reason you are doing this with wild grapes, it's not going to take nearly as long because they are a lot smaller. I've never seen anybody make raisins out of wild grapes, but I bet you probably could. All right, so for now, I'm going to stop the video and then I will come back when we've got other stuff to show. All righty, see you in a bit. Welcome back. All right, for the observant among you, yes, I am wearing a different shirt. It is actually a different day. It's the next day while I'm finishing this up. I had to leave from my shift at work. And so I put these in the fridge after I was done and then put them back in because they weren't quite done. So I said 4 hours, but I should have known that on the toaster oven it would take a little bit longer. It took me probably about 6.5, maybe a little more hours. So we're ready to take them out of the oven. So I'm going to turn this off. And let's take a look. Also, I think it's very appropriate. I've got some grapes right on my oven pads here. So I can tell you right away that it smells wonderful. All right, let's take a look. There you go. We have raisins now. So they were grapes, now they're raisins. So I also want you to notice it did seem like it worked out pretty well to keep them on the stem. Those ones look about the same as the other ones. Interesting. All right, so I'm going to set that down here so you can still keep it in the frame. All right, so what happened here? Why did these turn from grapes into raisins? Well, we had them at a really low temperature because we didn't really want to cook them. We just wanted to get them to dry out. So we were getting the water to evaporate. Now, a lot faster than they would be if this was in the sun. That would take a couple days, which you can feel free to try that if you would like. But still a lot, so it's a lot faster that it's evaporating being in the oven than it would be in the sun. But the sun is still a lot faster than they would evaporate if you were to say keep the grapes in the fridge. All right, so one thing that I think is interesting to notice on this is if you look at your pan, you'll notice the grapes there, but then you'll also notice a lot of the juices down below. So what happened is that the juices evaporated, but they also kind of went down in under the grapes and all around them. And what happened is it turned it into a syrup. So it's concentrated the sugars there. So if I were to try one of these, which I will, they should be cool by now. Then I can tell you that is by far the best raisin I've ever had. So much better fresh. But I think that actually has a lot more flavor than the grape does. So taste one of these and then compare it to how your grape tasted. So what do you notice? What's the difference in the level of sweetness? What's the different texture? Obviously, it's smaller. You notice that too. What else do you notice is different about this? All right, so what else do you notice has changed in those? So use your observational skills. Now, I think a good question is, why would we do this in the first place? Well, grapes have a lot of water in them, and that's why you can see they're a lot smaller when we shrunk all the water out of them. And I've talked about this in a couple before when we work with food, but water is something that's necessary for all life. So that's you and me, but that's also going to be a lot of other things, including microscopic life. And those little microscopic life forms, they love eating the food just as much as we do. So when food goes bad, that is really what's happening is microscopic things are getting at them. It could be bacteria or it could be fungus, but whatever it is, it's something else that's gotten to that food before you can. So it's really important to know that that's a big reason why you would want to turn grapes into raisins in the first place. Now, I think raisins taste better than grapes, but that's my opinion. But a big reason why people have done this in the past is because raisins last a lot longer than grapes. Grapes are going to go bad because they have that moisture in them, whereas these ones, even though they have a lot of sugar in them and, oh man, microscopic life forms and most things really love sugar because it's full of energy. But there's not a lot of water. And without that water, they can't live as easily. So these are going to last much longer. Now, these ones that we made ourselves, these look like they have still more moisture than you would get in raisins that you buy in a box at the store. So they're not going to last nearly as long there. But I would say if we were to leave these on the counter versus leaving grapes on the counter, these would definitely last longer. And you can try this for yourself if you'd like. Put a few of these out on the counter and then put a few grapes on the counter or away in a space where it's not going to stink things up. You could even do it in jars and see which ones last longer. So this is actually a big reason why there's a lot of dried foods in general. So think about things like dried fruit will last a lot longer. So I have some dried fruit in jars where I live, and those are going to last for months at least. Whereas the fresh fruit that I've got at my place will definitely not last for months. Apples last a pretty decent amount of time, but most fruit are not going to last anywhere close to that long. But a lot of dried fruits can. But you also have things like jerky is a way to make things last a lot longer. You have all sorts of things. So I know you can come up with more examples of dried foods if you want. So this is all about food preservation. So this is one way of making food last longer. If you want to see another way of making food last longer, then I would recommend that you also check out the video of making homemade mummies. We talk about other ways that you can preserve things in there. So that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. My name is Zach. This is Science Explosion at Hudson Public Library. Thank you and bye.